All right, it's Commander's Film Room time. George Carmi, Mark Bullock, Nick Akridge. You know the usual group on Tuesday. It's been a free agency extravaganza, fellas. Wild and furious. I could not tell you this time last week that I thought this group would have signed 9 free agents. 10, Nick, now that we got the long snapper, 10. I thought it'd be slow. It has not been. It has been nothing sort of slow. We're going to dive into the first three. The center, Biadish. I think I got that right. Armstrong, and the linebacker, which I'm very excited about. Nick, this Luvo we'll get into. Luvu, but maybe the middle linebacker we've been missing for a long time. George, who do we have up first? Very excited for this.
Yeah, we're going to look at Tyler Biadish, age 26, center from Dallas. He's familiar with Dan Quinn. Nick was graceful enough to share the PFF grade with a 69.2, ranking 14th out of 36 eligible centers. He had 1,000 snaps for each of the last 3 seasons. So, I think what I like about him is he's young. He's, a sending player. He's in a kind of solidified position after Chase Brouillet has been, left injured over the past couple of years. So it might be an added upgrade, but that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, I just want to, he's young, but he's experienced. It's not just the 1,000 snaps these past 3 seasons in the NFL. He was, correct me if I'm wrong, probably a 4-year starter. He was playing all the time at Wisconsin as well. So there's not really a front or blitz he hasn't seen. So it's a great sort of pairing with a young quarterback coming in.
And Nick, to that end, he actually was a 2019 All-American. I didn't realize that. He was the best center in all of college football, so it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's been playing center for a long time, even though he's only 26.
Mark, what does this do to the 3rd round pick from a year ago?
Well, Ricky Stromberg stays as the backup center for now. I think the fit possibly with the scheme wasn't necessarily there for Stromberg, and I think the fit with the scheme is going to be interesting for Biadish as well. I guess it was just a case of they didn't feel like he was going to fit what they wanted to do, or they just felt he's still too young and developing, and they needed a more established veteran to come in and pair with a young quarterback, and maybe down the road Stromberg they feel can still develop, but obviously they felt like he wasn't ready now, and so they needed to take action and go get a guy, and that's what they did.
Nick, quickly before we get into the film, it feels like the recalibration is a real thing. It looks like they want to win games next year, and I don't think they plan on starting over in quite the way I think most of us thought. Do you see it that way early?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too surprised at the amount of signings. I think that, again, this roster needed a lot of help. There were a lot of holes. There was a good reason they were 4-13. There was problems everywhere, and so the thing that I'm kind of happy about is that they didn't just go spend all of their cap, if that makes sense. These aren't massive deals. These are livable deals, and they're not going to destroy your cap situation. They're not going to you're not trying to just put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. You're going to this is how you sort of build a team. You kind of get these younger veterans. Again, I think the 3 we're going to talk about are going to be right around 30 years old when these contracts end. So
absolutely,
they're still going to be young, and then you just kind of build from there, and then go through the draft and just kind of keep developing these guys. But yeah, this roster for a long time has needed a lot of added depth, and I think that's at the very least is what they're doing.
And Doug, to that end, I think it's vividly clear that Adam Peters and company completely did not view the previous roster in high regard by any means, right? So they absolutely.
You remember the pause from the press conference when asked about the roster, and then you could tell he was trying to formulate something positive.
He's trying to be polite, exactly.
Right. And half the roster, just to be fair, half the roster wasn't under contract. They had something like 25 holes to fill. So this was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. The Philip
I just don't know if anybody really expected them to be the leader in the clubhouse for the number of free agents they signed early.
Yeah, exactly. I think right now I think they added the most amount of players in the NFL, but they're ranked number 9 in regard to total salary spent so far. So they've been pretty frugal. So
and dudes still want to play for Dan Quinn, I think, is interesting, right? Dante Fowler, all the way from Florida.
Yeah,
be happy if he spent his entire career with Quinn.
Great sign.
And according to JP Finley, Louvu said, the Panthers offered him a nice deal to say he was enticed by going over with them.
All right, Mark, whenever you're ready, let's get it started, man.
Yep. So, do you want to? There we go. So we got the first thing I thought that kind of stood out when looking at Biadish is he's quite an athletic center. Now he's not. Let's not get carried away. He's not like a Jason Kelsey that can kind of get from one side of the field to the other almost as fast as a linebacker, right? But for a center, he's athletic. And I thought I'd highlight that on a couple plays and what that kind of allows you to do. And this is against Washington. And this is just an outside run where you're going to see him get from the far hash here and make a block all the way outside the numbers on this side of the field. And he's actually going to block the safety, Percy Butler. And you're going to see he just is able to get all the way outside, work nicely outside the numbers, get all the way downfield and make a pretty emphatic block on Percy Butler. And this is the end zone angle. Again, there's no issues running and climbing and getting to his guy and shoving him over and making a pretty emphatic block. So he's a guy that is athletic for a center, and what that allows you to do is it brings a lot of flexibility to what you want to do schematically. So here we've got a little zone run, and he's going to help. Deron Payne is obviously a very good defensive tackle in the run game, and he's very hard to generate much movement against. But you see here he's a gap and a half outside of him, and he's going to come across and help the right guard and help shove Deron Payne outside. And again, watch where Payne starts. He starts in the middle of the field between the two hash marks. And as we run this on, you'll see he along with Zach Martin. And Martin was kind of getting stood up there, and Biadish comes along and gets a nice strong push, and they start getting some movement, and they get Deron Payne shoved all the way outside and allow this cutback. Now, unfortunately, the left guard here misses the block on Jamin Davis, and that means the cutback goes nowhere. But if the guard makes that block, then these two have done a great job clearing out Payne, and they continue to do so, and they get him almost all the way out to the numbers, right? So again, he started at midfield, but because you have this really good athletic center that can help reach across and secure Zach Martin's inside shoulder at right guard, and they are able to work together and generate movement. So that helps you on zone scheme runs. It also enables him to pull and do a lot of different type of runs where you have a center pulling, and this is a sweep run where you have the right guard kind of blocks down, the tight end tries to kind of block down on this defensive end, and then you have the right tackle pulling, and you have Biadish pulling, and so you'll see here you get your kind of down block, your pull, and your pull, and a nice little sweep run. And Biadish is coming out here, and he's thinking he's going to get a pull all the way out to the edge, but the defensive end does a nice job getting outside of the tight end. And so Biadish does a real nice job because he's athletic and he's such a smooth mover. He can quite easily see, okay, this block hasn't quite gone how it's meant to. I'll adjust, and I can see the threat here is Cody Barton coming inside. So he'll quite easily just adjust his path, cut off Cody Barton on the backside. And you can see, again, if the tight end is able to hold up his end of the bargain, that's a nice lane for the running back to work into, and then he's working one-on-one against a safety. So, unfortunately...
The big number, I was just thinking the big number from that little picture we put up was 1,000 snaps per season for the last 3 seasons is something that we greatly, as good as I think he is, that availability, as they say, is so important, and we haven't had it in Washington in a long time.
Hey, Nick and Mark, quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you carry on.
I was going to say, are the Cowboys overly reliant on any particular run scheme? Are they like a power scheme, a zone scheme? Do they have a nice little balance of both, or what have you seen so far as the observations?
They run pretty much everything.
Okay.
They have a very good offensive line, as we all know and have done for a while. And they pretty much run everything they want to run on any given week. They can run power, and you'll see in these clips they run zone, they run power, they run sweeps, they run crack tosses, and so he's pretty scheme diverse.
I love that.
Yeah. So the one thing I would say on that scheme diversity is so Washington with Cliff Kingsbury, we talked about on this show before, where he's looking in Arizona. At least he ran a lot more gap scheme stuff. And Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach, when he was with Buffalo and New York, he was more of a gap scheme kind of guy. And on gap scheme, you need to be able to, for a center, as you'll see here, you need to be able to block down on a defensive tackle to allow your guard to pull across and create an extra gap on the other side of the line. Now, this is where I do have a slight concern with Biadasz, is he's not necessarily the most overpowering center. So he doesn't do the best job of sustaining these down blocks. And you'll see some of these down blocks are against some very good defensive tackles. But as we know in this division, there are some very good defensive tackles. And so this is Fletcher Cox here, and they're going to try to run a power scheme to the left of the offensive line. And Biadasz is trying to block down on Fletcher Cox, but Cox pretty quickly recognizes what's happening, and he sees this kind of inside shoulder is somewhat weak for Biadasz, and Cox is able to kind of get across, and he does a great job reading the pull and anticipating it, but because of that, he's able to get across the face of Biadasz, and he's not able to back up his feet with his upper body and keep in front of him, and that allows Fletcher Cox to cross his face and then get to the play side of the run and make a tackle. And a good, I don't want to say good center, Biadasz is a good center, but the correct technique here would have Fletcher Cox cut off over here and creating a lane that way. But of course, Cox got down the line and made the tackle. So that is a slight concern, and this is another example. And again, this is a very good defensive tackle, probably one of the best in the league in Dexter Lawrence, but he's staying in the division, so he's going to be facing these guys twice a year. Yeah. Again, it's a down block. You're trying to run power. You're trying to get the guard to pull to the right side. But Dexter Lawrence just kind of, again, that inside shoulder is a little bit weak. He kind of gets himself a little bit closed off and doesn't cut off the move inside. Tries to kind of grab him a little bit at the end here, but you can see Lawrence is already across his face and working across the field. And again, he's able to get across and make the tackle.
We've seen Dexter Lawrence blow people up on this particular podcast so many times. And also, congratulations to Fletcher Cox, who retired. So we won't see him anymore.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. He's a very good player, very good career, and gave Washington a lot of problems. So I'm sure there are some very happy Washington offensive linemen that he's retired. But yeah, so I wanted to point out that he's not like a perfect center prospect. Like, he does have some things to work on, but he is only 26. He's still young. He can improve. And not all of his down blocks were huge issues. So it is something that he can improve, and with better technique, he can do a better job of. So this is another play against the Giants. This time it's not Dexter Lawrence in the air. It's a different defensive tackle. But again, he's still trying to down block and let the guard pull around. And this time you see he does a much better job of getting to the inside of the tackle and cutting him off. He brings his feet with him. He uses his hip and his knee almost to kind of hold this tackle to this side. And that stops the tackle from getting across his face and making a play. And then that creates the seal that they need. So, and this is one more. This time is against, I think it's Jalen Carter, their first round pick of the Eagles. Again, it's a down block. And again, he does a better job this time of getting his feet a little bit better sorted. He's a little bit torquey. And by that, he's kind of using his upper body to twist the guy over rather than getting his feet underneath him and really cutting him off. But he gets away with it. And again, seals him off. And then unfortunately the play breaks down on this side, and that is a dead play. But there is some potential there. He can still improve, but it's just something that'll be interesting to see how he fits exactly with this system, because we've talked about, we're expecting this to be more of a gap-based system, and a down block against a nose tackle from a center is a key part of that. But another key part of those gap systems is double teams, and that is something that he excels at. So this is an example against one of the Bills' nose tackles. It's a very good run defender, and he and Zach Martin are going to double team this guy. And the end zone, the reverse angle of this is the best one to look at it. But you'll see they both get a nice job getting in together on this and driving him back quite significantly. But you'll see from the end zone angle the technique's a lot better. So what you're going to see, and something that I've watched Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach, his coaching clinic of how he likes double teams to be executed, and he wants he talks about shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, foot to foot, and wanting to seal off this inside gap so that the defender can't penetrate it. And you'll see here they get shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, foot to foot, seal that inside gap so that the defensive tackle can't get in there. And Biadasz is doing a nice job of basically just not letting that defender cross his face, and then he's letting his right guard, Zach Martin, really do most of the pushing, and he's just kind of controlling with his hands inside. And then they get really nice drive back on that defensive tackle and open up quite a nice lane. And so that's something that you could potentially see with Sam Cosmi, right guard for Washington. He's got quite a lot of power when he drives on a double team like that, and having a center with that can secure the block initially and allow Cosmi to then kind of take over with his strength is something that I think could be a strength for Washington going forward. So it's not all negative in terms of running gap scheme stuff. It's just there are some things with down blocks, one-on-ones, where he can struggle a little bit, and he'll have to clean that up.
Hey, Mark, great job identifying Ben Johnson's coaching tape and talking about the hip-to-hip, shoulder-to-shoulder. That was a great illustration I just showed on the video right there. And he also drove back the defensive tackle a good 10 yards. That was fantastic. That was a great pushback. I love that. Yeah,
and the Cowboys' offensive line is kind of littered with those type of plays.
I was about to say it definitely helps when you're next to Zach Martin. That's a plus. But he'll be next to Sam Cosmi, and Cosmi's been doing pretty well. So
exactly. So then we move into a little bit of passing stuff, starting with the screen game. He, as we kind of talked about, he's a very athletic center, and again against Washington, I wasn't purposely trying to show every clip against Washington, but this is just a good example of how athletic he is. And he's got Jonathan Allen over his left shoulder here, and as the center, he needs to get out in front of this screen game, but he can't just allow Jonathan Allen to rush straight upfield straight away. So he does a nice job of delaying, releasing, getting a little punch on Allen to secure that, and then getting out. So you'll see that, and I've got the end zone angle, I think, on this one as well. Does that nice little punch, gets the full extension, makes Allen believe that he's trying to block him. And then when Allen kind of shreds him, he thinks he's fine. He thinks it's a normal passing play, and that's exactly the kind of technique you want from your offensive lineman. You want the defensive line thinking, oh, this is a drop back pass, so that then you can throw the screen over them. And so now you see Biadasz is here. You've got your right guard coming out here to the flat, and your running back sneaking out as well. And Biadasz is going to come out, get towards the numbers, and then work vertical. So he's going to get out, get towards the numbers, and then he's going to identify his target, which happens to be Cam Curl, because the guard's got the linebacker here. And then he's going to go and knock back Curl, cut him off, and clear quite an easy play. Touchdown. Yeah, and again, you see here he gets engaged with Jonathan Allen off the snap, makes him think that this is an actual pass block, and Allen is winning. In actual fact, he's getting out on the screen, and then he gets out to the numbers, and that's when he just then works vertical and goes straight at Cam Curl and knocks him back and clears quite a clear lane for probably the easiest touchdown of this guy's life. So
I know this doesn't have anything to do with the clip, but Cam Curl's in it, and it just makes me my brain wanders. It's been an interesting market for safeties.
Well, speaking of safeties, the Commanders just signed Jeremy Chin to a one-year
I like that.
$1 million deal.
That's good.
Okay.
Not bad at all.
Yeah,
I guess we'll be looking at him next week.
Well, that makes. I can give a quick insight because I've been watching some Luvu stuff, and he's with the Panthers, and that.
Oh, that's right.
Kind of makes quite a lot of sense in that he is kind of more of a linebacker safety hybrid. That Dan Quinn used a lot of DBs last year.
Yeah, it fits what they were doing last year of using 7 DBs on the field.
Exactly. They like Jaron Kearse was the kind of guy I would expect him to go after as kind of the Cam Crow replacement, because he's a safety, but he's a bigger safety. He can kind of play linebacker a little bit, and they had him doing that, and so that would be Chin is someone I actually had on a list somewhere that was someone that could kind of fill that role, but I wasn't necessarily expecting to go that way.
Obviously, we'll dive into it more next week. But does this pave a way for Quan to get into the strong safety spot full time, or do they still need work? Like, we've already seen that this group doesn't care about anybody that got drafted before, as they should. They didn't draft them, but like, what does this have for Quan? I mean, I think it means that definitely Curl's not coming back. I don't know what the money is, but what does it say about Quan? More importantly, I think
it's tough to say exactly because Quan is so versatile that he can play a lot of different spots. So it's hard to say exactly where they see him fitting in, and it might be that they really like that versatility and he can play a number of different roles, and they're just kind of filling in the other spots around him. And when they get to kind of training camp, they'll be like, okay, well, we have got a strong safety, so Quan, you can play nickel, or we have got a nickel, so Quan, you can play safety, or maybe we can try out a dime linebacker and all this kind of stuff. So I don't necessarily think it speaks to Quan's role immediately. I think if they sign a nickel corner, that would probably speak more to is Quan considered more of a safety or a nickel? If they don't sign a nickel, then that probably speaks to them thinking Quan can be their nickel.
I kind of like what Connor's kind of alluding to right here. He says Quan makes the most sense at nickel and free safety. I can see that as well. He's definitely pretty flexible in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. He can really, the versatility of being able to play nickel and match up over the slot, and then being able to play deep coverage. I think if he was just a deep safety, he'd still be a pretty good free safety. But that wouldn't be making the most of his versatility and his talents. So you kind of want him to have a mixed role. So yeah, I agree with that comment. I think he fits both those roles.
You may not know this right away. Did Chin play the will last season for them? It kind of was more of that hybrid, right? Not a nickel or not a safety.
I'd have to look more into exactly where he was. I think he was kind of that hybrid role, maybe more of that kind of dime linebacker than necessarily a full-time linebacker, but I'd need to look into more of it to see.
Okay.
So going back to Biadish, so here we've got, where are we? We were doing pass protection. Yeah. So another part of his pass protection, or one of the most important parts of his pass protection as a center, is his ability to identify where he needs to be helping. As the center, you have the ability to slide either way. Obviously, depending on the protection, some demand that you slide one way or the other. But if it's a solid protection where you're just dropping back, he needs to be able to identify where the threats are and who needs to help. And on this one, you see a good example of that. You got Jalen Carter, that first-round pick of the Eagles, working against Zach Martin, and obviously you've got your stud right guard, and you're thinking he's probably going to be fine, but this is also a very good defensive tackle. So he will run this on here. He slides to his right, and he sees that Jalen Carter gets a real nice punch, and Zach Martin gets kind of pushed off balance, and Carter's going to come back inside. And so he sees, and he's obviously looking out here. You can see his helmet looking straight at that, and he sees, okay, I need to help this guy out. Even Zach Martin's not perfect, so he slides across and he lands a nice punch, pushes him to the ground, and lands on top of him with a nice finish. And that's something you see pretty consistently from him. I think I've got another example. So again, here this time he's the center again in the middle of the line, and you've got this time he's going to help both guards. So first time he's going to slide again to Zach Martin, and then he's going to come back and help the left guard as well. So you'll see immediately sort of, again, Zach Martin kind of gets himself into a bad spot, and Fletcher Cox is kind of going to give him trouble and get inside. So Biadish is going to come across and help out and secure that. But as he's securing that block, you can see his left guard is kind of struggling a little bit with the other defensive tackle. So again, as the center, he's trying to keep both A-gaps relatively clean. So he kind of peels off, reaches out with his other arm and kind of hooks the other defensive tackle and slows that down and buys Dak Prescott time to roll back in the pocket and eventually find a throw downfield for a nice gain. So yeah, that was that was something that really stood out to me was his. He's really good at identifying where he needs to help, and he's always very aware. And
he looks cerebral, Mark. Right? That's kind of my takeaway from
exactly.
The
yeah.
One of the things that I noticed when I was watching him, I was just kind of looking at how he handles stunts and whatnot. And he's kind of always looking to help. Like he always kind of knows where he's needed to help at times.
That's great.
Sometimes that's not sitting in those A gaps. Sometimes he loops around guards and stuff to help and whatnot. So that is probably his best asset again, and that comes with experience and just playing a ton, and just kind of understanding where these threats are going to be.
Do we know generally in the Kingsbury offense who makes the calls? Is it the center or the quarterback? Either of you know the answer to that?
I don't think either of us would have an answer to that. You'd have to be in the meeting rooms to know, and it could be individual to the specific quarterback or center that you have on any given week. So yeah, I couldn't answer that honestly, but
I had a feeling, but I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, to back up Nick's point of being so aware and helping out his teammates, like you have to remember as an offensive line, yes, it's 5 individuals, but you're trying to block as a unit. And you need to have that spare man out quite a lot of the time. You're getting a 4v5, so that spare man is key, and it's quite often the center, and for him to be able to help the rest of his teammates, even if he's sliding across to take Cosme's guy, that's Cosme slide out and help Andrew Wiley at right tackle, right? So that awareness of where the threats are and the willingness to go help out rather than just being like, okay, my gaps are safe and I'll just sit here, is good, and it's as Nick said, one of his best traits. So in pass protection, kind of like in the run game, he does struggle a little bit with guys that are stronger than him. And again, this is Dexter Lawrence, who, again, I'll just caveat, he's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. But it did show up a couple of times when watching him. And again, you'll just see he kind of gets overpowered by a bigger, stronger guy in Dexter Lawrence. And when he's left one-on-one on his own against a real big guy that has some real good strength, that's when he can get in trouble in pass protection. And you put up the stats earlier. He's not someone that has given up a ton of sacks or a ton of pressures, so it's not like it happens every week and 10 times a game, right? But it's something that does creep up in his game from time to time against those more powerful inside rushers, and it's something that if he's isolated against those guys, he can struggle a little bit with. But he has you can tell that that's something that he has keyed in on in his game, as these big powerful guys can sometimes overpower me, and how do I counteract that? And one of his favorite ways in the games that I've watched of him, one of his favorite ways of doing that is kind of messing with their balance. So again, here's Jalen Carter, that first round pick for the Eagles, and he's just going to try to run straight up the middle right at him, and Eagles have got kind of 5 men on the line of scrimmage trying to again isolate Jalen Carter on him and take advantage of what we just saw with Dexter Lawrence one-on-one against him. But what you'll see, probably better from the other angle, but from this angle you'll also see it is he kind of catches Carter kind of leaning on him, and when you get a defensive tackle trying to bull rush you, they naturally have to lean on you as the center to drive you backwards. So if you can manage to give a little bit of depth to give them grounds, you can then pull them off balance, and then because they're leaning forward, you can just drag them down off balance. And what you'll see here is he kind of gets a little pull with his hand here, this side, and drags him down, and that pulls him off balance, and then he's again able to push him over and finish quite nicely. And you'll see it from the other angle a little bit better as we drive this one back. Carter gets in lower than him, and that is a little bit of an issue for him. He does pop up out of his stance a little bit quickly, and that can leave his chest vulnerable, which is why those bigger, stronger guys can get at him and drive him back a little bit more. But he does manage to get a hand inside, crucially, and you'll see here he just kind of rips that hand, pulling Carter down, and that just pulls him forward and pulls him off balance. And when a defensive tackle that is 300 odd pounds is slightly off balance, it's very, very easy to then just push them over and finish the block nicely. So So yeah, I think that was all I had on Biadish. Yeah, that's us into Armstrong. So I think we wanted to move to Nick and Luvu next.
All right, yeah, let's kind of pivot a little bit really quickly. So our next person that we're going to focus on is Frankie Luvu, a linebacker addition from the Carolina Panthers. 26 years old. He has a PFF grade of 80 overall. The 10th rated middle linebacker in the NFL. The one thing that kind of eye pops to most people that are looking at him, he has a number 1 rated pass rush grade as a middle linebacker at 90.1. So there's definitely a blitzing component to him, or at least so we think. So Nick, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, so I was a huge fan of this one. He's going to be used in a number of different ways. We kind of, talked about it before when we were looking at Dan Quinn's defense of how they use Micah Parsons and set him up well to, rush the passer and give him advantages in rushing the passer and give him easier matchups. You saw that a lot with him in Carolina. And he's just a giant ball of energy. And he will run through every single person's face. And it's going to be, it's going to be
sound of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, first clip here is kind of a perfect example. The Colts, run a counter scheme here with the tight end and the guard pulling. You've got Lulu right here. So once this plays, he's reading that guard, and again, he sees that guard pull, so he knows he needs to be the first one to attack. Comes up in there and just runs through the face. There's not much technique there. It's just pure, just run right through him.
Who wants it more? I love that.
Blows him up, and then eventually makes the play. But it's one way, a lot of times, coaches want him to maybe box that in, kind of take that outside shoulder and box that back in. But he decides that I'm just going to run right through you. And it works out perfectly because a lot of times they're not really expecting it. And he ends up blowing up both pulling defenders and then can easily just kind of fall off of it and make the tackle. Let me see. Next up.
So it's him and Shaq Lawson there. What I haven't looked at Dan's defense enough to know like what is, and we're getting there, but Lulu, I guess, is the middle. Nick, I know he wore the green dot for them, and you don't have to be the middle to wear the green dot, but it sounds like in nickel it'll be him and Cameron Davis, I suppose. They swap or
they played him. I mean, again, a lot of different spots. It wasn't traditionally linebacker, so we'll kind of see where they want to put him and Jamin on the field at the same time. But again, they use him a lot of times in these 5 kind of lineman looks as an edge rusher at times. They've used him in simulated pressure looks, line up in the A gap and whatnot. So he's going to be a type of guy that they can again use as a chess piece to put him in spots that are best for him.
So do they have a true middle linebacker, or will they not use one, do you think? We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here.
It's kind of tough. We saw Jamin was best when he was kind of not using in that situation. So
right.
Again, like you said, he did have the green dot, so he was obviously comfortable with handling those sort of calls. I'd have to look more into kind of like the structure of the Panthers defense and whatnot to see how they used him specifically.
Sure. Shall I make a quick observation on that one? So Jamie Davis, when he struggled when he was a Mike linebacker, was because he had the green dot and was trying to make all the calls at the line of scrimmage. And that caused him to be slow at the snap because he was too busy organizing the defense and thinking, okay, is this motion means, do I need to make this adjustment and all that kind of thing. So he wasn't playing fast as soon as he became the Mike because he had all the extra responsibility. In terms of his actual positioning on the field and which gaps he was responsible for and that kind of thing, he was fine as a Mike. It was just that he was reacting too slow because he was too busy thinking at the snap. So for me, I think Luvu will be the guy that gets the green dot because, as Nick has pointed out, he plays at 1,000,000 miles an hour regardless of what his responsibility is. So they'll give him the green dot, let him make the calls, and let him just go run his head off somewhere. And then Jamin, he'll probably be the will, but if they want to line up in some funky fronts where Luvu moves to the edge or he lines up randomly in the B gap for whatever reason, then Jamin can sit in the middle as the single linebacker, or if you bring a safety down into the box and maybe that's Chin that they've just signed, or maybe it's if they bring back Cam Carroll or whoever, then Jamin Davis could play the kind of fake Mike linebacker that is the position of the Mike, but without the responsibility of it. So that would be how I initially think that it would play out, is that Luvu's going to have the green dot. Jamin's going to be the more traditional linebacker. But when they kind of both line up in a kind of standard front, it's going to be Luvu as the Mike and Jamin as the Will.
I see that.
Yep. So yeah, again, plays with his hair on fire. Cowboys here, they're coming out of Wildcat, which, yeah, always works. Wildcat always works. So you pretty much know you're getting a run here. And he just kind of quick to trigger again. This is a guard tackle counter here. And in this time, he's got a tight end trying to block down on him. And let me probably circle in for you. Right here, tight end tries to down block on him, and again, knows exactly what's coming and makes him whiff, blows up another guard, and makes the play. Again, he will, if he's wrong, he's going to be wrong at 100 miles per hour. And when he's right, again, it looks fantastic, but he will go 100 miles per hour. And honestly, that's one of the best traits that you can have is
absolutely.
It's something like, again, when Mark was talking about Jamin Davis, is he would hesitate a lot of the times, and he's gotten so much better at it over the past couple of years, but Luvu will not hesitate. It's honestly one of the small problems he has when it comes to like coverage and whatnot. He bites on a lot of play action from what I've seen so far. But, you know, most of the times when he's coming downhill like this, he's usually right. And it just kind of leads to just car crashes basically on the field.
I think you want a little bit of crazy from a middle linebacker, so I kind of like the whole Luvu addition there.
Yeah.
I think he will be a fan favorite. I think people want that kind of heartbeat of the defense type of player. I don't know if you're going to address it at all, Nick, but, you know, from what I've read so far, I guess coverage is potentially an issue for him. That's what I've kind of read so far, kind of gathered. Or what have you seen? Yeah,
coverage isn't, you know, he's not the greatest coverage linebacker in the world. But my biggest concern with him is simply just missed tackles.
Okay.
He missed a lot of tackles last year. I think he had about the 8th most for middle linebacker, and percentage was kind of up there as well, which, you know, is obviously a concern and whatnot, but that, you know, that usually means you're in the right spot if you're missing that many tackles. But that would be my biggest concern with him, is missing tackles. The coverage is fine. Like I said, he bites on play action a lot. Sometimes he doesn't get enough depth on his drops. But yeah, the biggest concern is absolutely missed tackles.
Okay.
So these are just, again, a bunch of clips of some of his best pass rush moves. You know, sometimes they're just going to blitz him from an off-ball linebacker, like we have here. He's just going to kind of blitz and go right through the right guard's face here. Again, they use him everywhere. And again, he's going to come 100 miles per hour every single time. It doesn't really matter what's happening, and completely blows him up.
Crush that guard, yeah, exactly.
Lets his friends clean it up. And again, got another one. This time here, he's kind of creeping up towards the edge here. But again, he's a B gap player here, off ball, coming in on the blitz and blows right through the right guard again. He's not afraid to do any to again run through people.
He feels like the signing that fans have liked the most so far.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of this one again because I think you can be really creative with how you use him. Again, similar to the Micah Parsons when they would use him in you know, kind of unique pass rush spots. I'm not saying he's Micah Parsons. Micah played a lot more edge, but there's a lot of skills here in the pass rush ability that you can use, and again, create favorable matchups, blitz more, and not just kind of rely on the front four. Let him, again, like we're going to see here, come downhill and run through people. This time shows off the quickness a little bit. Shows you that it's not all just straight bull rushing, but again, gets to the right guard, makes the play. And here, this is a kind of a perfect
everywhere.
example.
I love it. Yeah,
it's kind of a perfect example of what we talked about when we looked at the Dan Quinn defense of, you know, they line Micah Parsons up over the center a lot of times to just kind of get him that one-on-one matchup. So you have that again here with this front. You've got him lined up over the center, blitzing the whole time, easy win, puts pressure on the quarterback. Still a pretty great throw, but a quick win. Pressure
I love
on the
that.
quarterback.
That's a great. You made my day by showing me this clip. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Next up again, same thing. This time use him as a blitzer, get him in a free gap, and if you're going to have a running back try to block him, it usually does not turn out well. He will again run through a running back every single time. Puts pressure on the quarterback.
Run through him too.
Yeah.
Would you characterize him as a good downhill type of linebacker? Like I feel like a lot of these clips so far are kind of okay. He's downhill. Okay.
Yeah. Again, if you are in his way, it's gonna be a problem. You guys, it's a car crash every single time he makes contact with everybody, and he's just fun, man. Like I said, if he's wrong, he's gonna be wrong at 100% effort, and honestly, that's kind of all you can really hope for. Again, here as a blitzer, running right through a line or a running back who's kind of late to pick him up.
Look at Kirk Duck. That's funny.
and Nick, am I wrong here? This was an undrafted free agent that worked his tail off, right, to get where he's at now.
Yeah,
seems like that's kind of like what they're looking at.
Team captain too this year.
And again, he plays with that sort of energy of people constantly doubting him or whatnot. But again, they use him a lot on these sort of blitzes to get him matched up with a running back because they knew that was never going to work out for the running back.
But that was a tough day right there.
Yeah. So that's just kind of a cut up of some of his best plays. Again, they used him in a bunch of different spots. They blitzed him. Set him up over the center, put him in favorable spots, use him a ton on some stunts to kind of loop him around. And this is where he wins. This is where you kind of see those flash plays is as a pass rusher.
I like it. Mark, do you have anything you kind of want to touch on before we pivot to Armstrong? What are your thoughts on Luvu?
I thought obviously Nick demonstrated there the pass rush upside, and that's probably the number one thing that you're looking at when you go for a guy like Luvu is he's going to play Mike linebacker, but you're in this defense they're very versatile in who they can bring and who they can rush, and sometimes it's just rush everyone, which isn't the most versatile, but when you have the guys do it, and being able to bring extra rusher like that if you can scheme things up, and Dan Quinn has shown like he can scheme things up for individual rushers, and if you can bring that guy and scheme things up to get him on running backs, that's, as Nick just showed, that's obviously a win for him, and he's capable of taking on guards, and that attitude of just hair on fire, going downhill, I'm going to run straight at you and straight through you. It shocks a lot of offensive linemen, and so he can just kind of stun them with that, and that creates pressure. So it's certainly something that adds a different element that we haven't really seen in Washington for a while. Is a linebacker that can rush from the inside rather than off the edge. It adds a different element, and I think that's good. I think in coverage, I actually kind of liked him a little bit more than Nick. I had one or two clips, but we won't get to those. But he had a nice job in coverage, and at times I agreed with Nick on the missed tackles thing. That did show up a couple times, and that if he's playing at 100% speed the whole time, he does get himself into some bad spots sometimes with run fits. But you would much rather him play at 100% and get downhill and get to the wrong spot quickly than sit back 5 yards off the ball, waiting to see what's happening, and suddenly you're getting blocked and knocked out of the play. So at least when you're going fast and you get into the wrong spot, you have a chance of blowing up through the line of scrimmage and forcing a cut the wrong way. So I like him, and I think he will bring a lot to the defense, and it's going to be real fun to see how they scheme up his pass rush ability.
George, I know that's not about today, but I just happened to notice while I was checking for news, Jeremy Chin is another one of these guys that came specifically to play for Dan Quinn. So I think that's also becoming a trend that I think is interesting.
Very interesting. Mark, did you want to touch on Luvu with that pass coverage at all, or just want to go to Armstrong? It's up to you.
No, let's move to Armstrong because I don't know where the Luvu clip was.
Sounds good. Good play.
It was at the end of my clip. So
all right, sounds good.
We'll move on to Armstrong.
The concerns with his coverage again, it was mostly those missed, like almost all of our downgrades that we had for him were missed tackles. Again, there wasn't a lot where he was out of position. It was just, again, the
Well, it
misstep.
was a great point by you, Nick. You've got to be in the right spot to miss the tackle. I mean, I know that's the positive,
Yep.
sun shining type of look at it, but it's
Glass half full kind of view.
Yeah, and most coaches always say, if you want to make a mistake at 100%, right? So I'll have to take
He
exactly. All right, so it's gonna be a glorious miss. I can't wait to see that. I don't want to see that on Sundays, but all right, let's pivot a little bit. So I think this is probably the least surprising acquisition that we had so far on day one of free agency. We're looking at Dorrance Armstrong, who's part of the Cowboy to DC pipeline. People are kind of raising an eyebrow right now about that, but I'm not mad at it. Age 26, defensive end, ranking 49th out of 112 on PFF, 69.6 PFF score. He was more of a rotational pass rusher, but he produced, in his limited time, and it's going to be kind of a upside, kind of a solid floor perspective from Armstrong, from my opinion. The big eye-popping stat, he's a 11.7% pass rush win rate. So that's Dorrance Armstrong. I'm going to throw the mic over to Mark.
And they're all 26 years old. I mean, this group that we're looking at, I mean, that was another thing. You can see guys that are, I think, still ascending, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a key with a lot of these guys, is they still have room to grow, and they have the time to be able to grow. They're not all 30, 35 that are, they've got 1 or 2 years left. They've got plenty of time, and that's key for these guys, because they're not the biggest names. They're not the best players yet, but they still can produce at a decent level. We've already seen that. They've proven that, and they can potentially get to an even higher level. And this is kind of a really good example of that. Is Armstrong is a really nice toolsy player. One of his best traits is he's got super long arms. I think they're nearly 35-inch arms, which are ridiculously long for a defensive end. And that length can give just about anyone a ton of trouble when he gets it right. And that's something that he's working on. He doesn't consistently get it right. But this is an example against probably the best right tackle in the league for the last 10 years, Lane Johnson, who himself has pretty long arms. But you'll see he's rushing off the edge here, and he just uses a long arm rush, and he gets a lot of pressure. So you see he works up the field, and you get Lane Johnson kind of exposing his chest a little bit, and he reaches out with this inside arm, gets on the chest, and Johnson, he normally has long enough arms that he can kind of just be like, yeah, that's fine, you can long arm me, I'll just control you because my arms are longer than yours. But Armstrong does a nice job of driving him back, and you can see Johnson's at full extension there, and he's just about reaching the chest. He's trying to grab on for something, but Armstrong's got all the leverage here. He's got a hand on the chest, he's got the lower pad level, and there he's able to just turn the corner and drive his feet and drive Lane Johnson back. And again, not many people consistently are able to drive Lane Johnson back, but Armstrong does a really nice job, again, extending his arm, driving him back, and Johnson does manage to anchor at the end, but by that point he's a yard away from Jalen Hurts, and he doesn't know where Hurts is, he doesn't know where the ball is, and Armstrong's able to shed the block, get inside, and go sack Hurts, arrive at the same time as Parsons, but he got credited for that sack, so tough luck Parsons. But again here, this is the other angle of it. You can see again he reaches out with that inside arm, that real long arm. Again, Lane Johnson really struggles to reach him and do anything about that long arm rush, and when he kind of turns that corner and flips his hips and starts driving, that's when he can extend that arm, and you can see he's got really under Johnson. He's driven him back and got him stacked up, and again Johnson has kind of dropped anchor here and kind of recovered, but again he's still only a yard away from Jalen Hurts at this point, and Armstrong's able to kind of torque him aside and get inside and make the sack. So real nice play against one of the best tackles in the league, and that's the upside, that if he can work and improve that long arm rush, he can still grow, he can still get better, and that's that could be a real key feature rush for him. But in the meantime, he's still a very good versatile rusher, and you'll see in a lot of Cowboys clips that we've shown, and this is one I think I've shown when we were talking about Dan Quinn, is he moves around a lot. And here you see him, like we saw him just then off the edge against the right tackle. Here he's inside, standing up, working what looks like it's going to be against the guard, but actually he's stunting across the line as part of a stunt. So again, he's able to work across the line, and again, this was mainly to get Parsons that one-on-one against the guard, and Parsons gets the initial pressure, but Armstrong is right there to follow up with it. And so Stafford's able to step up and away from Parsons, but then suddenly he's got this second rusher. And this is something that Armstrong is really good at, is being that second guy there, that if you have this stud, and obviously Washington doesn't have Micah Parsons, and at some point they're going to need to find that number one rusher, but when they get that guy and they scheme everything up for him, and maybe sometimes that's going to be Luvu, possibly, if they scheme things up for him, and Luvu's able to generate the initial pressure, then you've got Armstrong there as the supporting act, and you see here he's here to supplement that pressure, and as Stafford's able to step up away from Parsons, he's then, instead of being able to just get rid of the ball instantly, he's then got to think about, oh God, I've got to now avoid the second guy. And so Armstrong's there and gets a hand on him, which again delays him, and then Parsons is able to get there and do things that Micah Parsons does. But the ability to line up in different spots, stand up, sit down, work from a 4-point stance instead of a 2-point stance, and shift inside, line up outside, move all over the place is a real asset, especially in a defense like Dan Quinn's, where he moves guys around all the time and he tries to make the best matchups, as we talked about with Parsons, and possibly with Luvu. And then so here, this is probably, it's not the most spectacular trait, but it's one that is a very important thing for pass rushers, and it's a motor, and he's got a consistent motor that just keeps going. He doesn't quit on any plays. He just keeps going after guys. And so you'll see here again, he's lined up inside. They're thinking that he's working against the guard. He's actually stunting inside. And you see here as we get inside, he stunts nicely, comes around the edge, and you got the right guard and the center all coming across, and even the running back coming across trying to pick him up. And he gets kind of knocked down here. He does create a lot of pressure interiorly here. There's a lot going on, and it's a messy pocket for Jared Goff. But he gets knocked down because he's had 3 guys all hit him at the same time. But even though he's knocked down, he's not giving up on the play.
But he gets up
immediately,
again.
Bounces back up, and goes and makes the play. Yes, exactly. So you'll see again from this angle, he's coming around, and you've got 3 guys here all making contact on him, all knocking him over. But he doesn't give up on the play. He bounces back up, and again he goes and gets half a sack with Mike Parsons. So that motor is.
If I got that song stuck in my head all day, I'm going to be really pissed off at you.
I instantly started singing it the second he said it. He gets knocked down. So
that's so funny.
So that motor really translates to more than just as a pass rusher. That translates to the whole game. And so you'll see here again, this is a real funky look where you've got him inside stood up, you've got Michael Parsons inside stood up, you've got 2 ends on the edge, and you got a safety down in the box here. So it's a funky look. You got an empty formation from the Eagles, so you're thinking it's pass. And so his initial rush, the rush isn't that good. He's kind of just, I think he thought he was working the stunt with Parsons, and Parsons kind of goes on his own. And so he ends up trying to rush the left guard and not really having a plan. But despite that, he keeps his eyes on Hurts. You can see here he kind of peels off, keeps his eyes on Hurts. And as soon as Hurts pulls that ball and starts to scramble, he's the one that's ready to go chase him down, because, Jalen Hurts is a very mobile quarterback and is capable of making a play. And he chases him down, and Hurts looks like he's got him beat for pretty much the whole way, and he still manages to go make that tackle.
It's a great play. It's a hell of a play.
And it's the other part I forgot to mention is this is 3rd down. So Hurts is desperate for that first down marker, and he brings him down outside of that first down marker, and it ends up being a 4th and 1, which the Eagles don't make. So
can you run that one back, Mark? It'd be awesome. Yep. Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, you just see him run down this one, and it's all about the motor. It's all about the effort. He goes and makes that tackle and saves that first down conversion, and the Cowboys get the ball back. So it just speaks to obviously the work ethic and the player, the person he is. But the motor is relentless, and that shows up consistently, and it shows up in more aspects than just as a pass rusher. It shows up, in unexpected areas where you're not necessarily expecting your pass rusher, your defensive end, to go chase down the quarterback. When he's scrambling around, you want him to go make sacks, but these are plays that need to be made by someone, and he was the one to do that. So the other thing that I think this is the last clip I got of him, but we talked about him being versatile, moving inside, moving outside. This time he's inside, and this is kind of as a part of a 3-man front, more of a 3-4 look, where you've got Lawrence and Parsons on the edge out here, and then you've got kind of interior 3. And Armstrong I think he's about 280 pounds, which is quite heavy. It might be 275. I can't remember exactly, but he's quite heavy for a normal defensive end, but he's kind of light for what you would call a 4i, which is a 3-4 defensive end. But he can slide in and he can hold his own in this position. And you can see a run game here. Lions, one of the best rushing attacks in the league. Left tackle trying to block down on him and pin him inside, kind of like we saw with Biadish earlier, where you're trying to
260 for Armstrong, Mark.
260, right? Okay, so he's undersized, more lighter than I thought he was, but he's holding his own here on the inside, despite being quite so small. And again, a big tackle trying to block down on him, like we saw with Biadish trying to block down on guys. This time, so we got a power. I think it's a power scheme. I think the guard pulls, but it might just be a duo scheme. Either way, he's getting blocked down by this guard, and the running back's trying to run outside. And what you'll see here is he holds his own. He does a nice job, gets low, gets his hands inside, stacks the tackle up, gets his hat inside because he's playing the inside gap. But he also keeps his hands inside so that when this back, or if this back bounces this run outside, he's able to readjust and get back outside. So you'll see, again, hats inside, playing that inside gap, taking away that run, forcing the cut outside. And once that running back starts to cut outside, because he's got his hands inside, he's got the lower pad level, he's got all the leverage, despite this guy being much bigger and should being able just to maul him and knock him over. He gets back outside, reaches out, possibly a little hit of a face mask, but we'll allow it. And he wraps him up, grabs on, and brings him down. And that's a real nice run stop. So what you've got, and again, this is the other angle of it, where you see, again, he's battling against this guy who's probably got 40, 50 pounds on him, should be able just to pin him inside and allow this run to hit that crease, but he's able to bounce back outside and make that tackle. So that's a big play, and especially in this Cowboys defense, this version of this Cowboys defense, where they didn't really have any linebackers. They needed their defensive linemen to make some plays in the run game to stop the run. So having a guy like that even though he's undersized, can kick inside and make a nice run stop like that. This is the Luvu coverage play, so we can maybe talk about that one. But overall, on Armstrong, the kind of points I wanted to make was has some good tools, but still needs to develop them. That long arm can be a huge asset for him, kind of like Preston Smith back when he was with Washington. That long arm,
I can see that.
never fully developed into what it should have been, but it is a huge asset. He's got a great motor, and that shows up consistently in all aspects of the game, not just as a pass rusher. And the versatility that he's able to move all over the place, line up wherever you want him, have him standing up, hand in dirt, whatever you fancy, he'll play it, and he will do a pretty good job. So very solid player.
I think inadvertently you showed the Dorrance Armstrong highlight reel. I think walking away, I was excited about him, but I was also excited about Dan Quinn's defense. I just feel like it's so diverse and they're so flexible, multiple, and how they move players around. I'm really excited to see that in UC.
Yeah, you're going to see a ton more fronts, different fronts that you haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. It's going to be fun instead of just, the same 4-down front that you've seen.
As Ben Fennell called it, the big bag of yuck as far as the defense went last year, which says it all. George, 1,640 people tuned in today between YouTube and Twitter. Big day. I mean, the show goes over 3,000 weekly, but live at show. Really appreciate everybody that comes out, tunes in, takes their evenings with us. It's fantastic. Fantastic.
It's been a blast.
We couldn't do it without you and Mark and you, Nick. So, I know George and I feel really blessed that you guys do this with each week, because
I'm just here to listen to Mark. That's all.
Aren't we all?
So speaking of which, are we going to wrap it up with Frank Luva? I want to see that pass coverage. Are you down for that, Mark, or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's there. So if you want to quickly go over that play, we can do it.
Yeah, I know exactly which play it was. It was a really good play where he's sitting in a zone here and matches with the crosser, makes a nice play on the ball.
Yep, exactly. So you got CeeDee Lamb here. Cowboys in the low red zone, just about 5-yard line. You got CeeDee Lamb running a shallow cross as part of a bunch set. Luvu's just kind of sitting in zone in the middle of the field. He matches it really nicely and then undercuts it. So I'll let this play, and then I will pause it when we get to the end zone angle. So again, he matches that crosser, does a real nice job undercutting it and showing off his length. And you'll see here, again, Luvu's sitting in the middle of the field, watching for the threats from that side, identifies CeeDee Lamb's crossing route, sits on it, gets his eyes back on the quarterback, knows that he's athletic enough to get in front of it if he needs to, and he has the leverage advantage. Starts seeing that, okay, this is probably where the ball's going, gets himself in position to undercut the throw. Ball's coming out now, and you can see he's in a great position to undercut this, and then he gets his arm out, full extension. Only he will know whether he actually fully tipped this ball.
And he will say
not
he did.
100% clear.
He definitely will say he did. That's hilarious.
He will 100% say he did, and he was credited officially with a pass breakup. So I'm going to say he did tip this ball. But obviously, having a defender draped all over you with a hand right in at the catch point is going to make it very hard to catch this ball, even if you are CeeDee Lamb.
The irony, Mark, is that you went Cowboys versus Panthers on this thing, so we also got a Biadish rep in here.
That's funny.
I would like to say I'd be in trouble if I didn't mention that no matter if he got a hand on this or not, he still got a +1 grade here. So just want to throw that PFF thing out there for you.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, so that was the coverage play that I had. So that was what I thought we would end it on nicely. I also had the run play that Nick had, so we'll ignore that. We'll finish on that coverage play.
I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you, man.
Yep, all good.
So it kind of has gone according to plan, at least in my brain. This was not a great edge class to be drafting, so they've hit it hard in free agency. I expect that they'll do the same in the draft with tackle position, most likely. I'm assuming they'll still sign at least one in free agency. So the thing that GMs are always talking about is, you build the floor up through free agency and then you try to elevate your ceiling with the draft. And it feels like that's what they've attempted to do so far. So through the early stages, we've only got 3 guys here. I guess we'll try to knock 3 more down next week, but it feels like they've got an unexpectedly great start to free agency.
Yeah, next week we can go through the kicker, long snapper, and Marcus Mariota, right?
Yes. Perfect deal for the long snapper.
Pretty great.
What the people always tune in for the long snapper coverage.
Absolutely.
I can show you one clip of if he snaps it correctly, and that's all you need to see.
Love it.
All right, boys. We'll see you next Tuesday. This was great. Thank you.
See you guys.